A very good evening and welcome all to our next session, The Rise and Fall and Future of Bollywood with Mayur Didolkar in conversation with Maithili Rao and Balaji Vittal. Maithili Rao is an Indian freelance film writer, journalist, and former English lecturer based in Mumbai. She has worked with publications including The Hindu, Frontline, Film Comment, The Sunday Observer, Gentleman, The Independent, and Screen. Balaji Vittal, author, Bollywood celebrator, public speaker. He won the National Award for Best Book on Cinema in 2011 and Mami Award in 2015. Novels. He's also been a student at Spiral Bound, a screenwriting initiative of Baman Irani. Mayur has also written three feature-length screenplays, which are in various stages of development. This discussion will be led by Mr. Mayur Didolkar, and I now request him to begin this interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rucha. Thank you, everybody, at the wonderful team of Pune International Literary Festival 2022, as well as our wonderful sponsors, Vishwakarma Publications. And a very warm welcome to all of you. A warm welcome to my fellow panelists, Balaji Vittal and Maithili Rao. And let me say that if we are discussing about Bollywood, I could not have been in a more esteemed or better company. So these two people are, I think, two of the most knowledgeable people about Bollywood, and I'm really looking forward to having a great discussion. However, before we start the discussion, let us take in the title of our panel for a minute under consideration. We are talking about rise and fall of Bollywood and the future of Bollywood. Now, whenever we are talking about rise and fall, usually, uh, not usually, but at least many times, we are trying to use that connotation for something where the fall is completed, and probably so we are when we discuss things which had happened in the past, for example, like the Roman Empire or the Greek Empire, we discuss these terms. Whereas Bollywood, as of today, is a thriving industry that employs hundreds, thousands and thousands of people. And actually, I would like to start this question on a curveball. Sorry for throwing this curveball at you, Balaji, but I would like to actually know your opinion. That is rise and fall the right connotation, or are we talking about the evolution of Bollywood?
Well, when you say rise and fall, I hope you can hear me clearly.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't know why we are talking about a fall. I don't think there's been a fall. Yeah, there's been a change. There's been a change in the way that scripts have been written. There's been a change in the way the characters have been portrayed. There's been a change in music, but I don't know that we can call it a fall. Yeah, I think I'll go for what you said first, evolution. I think I'll go for that rather than fall. Of course, I'll defer to
Uh,
Maithili and her experience as well for her
yes.
opinion on this.
What is your opinion, Maithili? What we are seeing, are we seeing some kind of a structural destruction of a century-old industry, or are we seeing a part of a cycle that the industry has gone through before?
I think things are cyclic usually, and even popular culture is not immune to change. If it's immune to change, then it's dead. It has to change, is the only constant that way. So it has to reinvent itself to stay relevant. So I feel that this evolution is the right word for it, because especially in the last 2 decades, there's so much happening on the communication side, OTT and other forms of not just going to the theater and watching a big movie. That has changed. The whole viewing experience has changed. Now you see it on your cell phones, wherever you are. So that whole viewing experience has changed, and so has the content. So I would stick with evolution, because evolution means a certain kind of a progress, a progressive kind of a change. It could be anathema to some people who are used to the old formula of what is defines Bollywood, but I think that definition has to change.
Great. Balaji, I would like to just as a different way to approach this subject, I would actually like both of you to put on your historian hats for a minute each, one after another. And if Balaji, you could take us through the changes that happened in the film industry, maybe starting from the time, just maybe from the time of Mr. Rajesh Khanna as the biggest superstar, and quickly bring us here. And then I would like Maithili to do the same with the evolution of women characters, because I think a lot of changes that has been taking place there. So for a minute, I would like to request both of you to take off your journalist hats and put on your historian hats and take us through that. So Balaji, you first.
Rajesh Khanna was the first superstar in Indian cinema, in Hindi cinema at least. There had, in fact, the coin had to be the term had to be coined for Rajesh Khanna because he became such a big phenomenon. Though before him, for 20, 25 years, there had been the single hero. There had been either a Devanand movie or a Dilip Kumar or a Raj Kapoor film. So there were single heroes or Rajendra Kumar for that matter. They were big heroes, but nobody as big as him. So that happened with Rajesh Khanna's coming. It was like a whole country becoming mad about him. Then in the 70s, of course, there was an angry young man, and the dual hero concept came in. Amitabh Vinod Khanna, Amitabh Shashi Kapoor, Amitabh Dharmender, right? It was mostly about that. And then maybe starting the late 70s, your Amar Akbar Anthony, 3 heroes, 4 heroes. And somehow the 2 or the 3 hero concept became a norm. The multi-starrer became a norm. That is how the hero characters have evolved, and the hero started getting more shades of gray, right? Starting from the anti-hero, then you had that the psychotic hero, you had the sort of the villainous hero, or the ambiguous hero. So somewhere that has changed, and I think it's changed for the better, because the heroes look more real now. They don't look like a clean, very clean, whitewashed version. कि इससे अच्छा कोई हो ही नहीं सकता दुनिया में, right? So I think that's an important change. From the lead hero perspective, I would say that.
Great. Maithili, how would you see the changes? So I think you used a very interesting term. So from Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge to a queen, even if we just take the last 20 years. But feel free to go back even further than that and take us through the journey of evolution of the...
We talk of the golden period of Hindi cinema, when I think you had actors like Meena Kumari, Nutan, Wahida Rahman, Nargis. They were sort of on par with the heroes. Not exactly on par. It has still been a male-dominated industry, but still they had important roles. And you could have a Mother India being made. You could have a Choti Bahu coming out in Sahib Baby or Gulam. So they were those very interesting characters, and women were interesting individuals. But then came the period of Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh age and all that. You had the rom-coms where she's just a decorative appendage who will have a couple of dances, couple of duets, and a couple of angry scenes, dramatic scenes, comic scenes. That was all she was reduced to. Then you had the avenging angels coming in when I think heroines weren't getting any roles. Everybody, right from Rekha down to some other starlet, would get into leather pants and wielding a whip and a gun, and suddenly she would go become a gaon ki gori in her lehenga and all that for a seduction scene. That avenging angels came in, and that was, except you don't put Bandit Queen in the same category, because that was a very important film based on a real life character. So the heroine got totally sidelined, and in the same, a little later, 70s and 80s was also the age of the parallel cinema, where you had Shabana, Smita, Deepthi Naval, Rohini Vattangadi, so many actors coming in, and they created a new image for the Indian woman in cinema. And I don't think mainstream cinema responded to it right away, but then they were forced to, because the directors didn't make it in mainstream cinema, but the actors did come in, especially the women. They got heroine roles, but a heroine with a difference, because you couldn't think of an Arth with Shabana and Smita playing those roles. And Shabana would go back to being the meek, submissive wife, accepting her repentant husband who's come back. And even the other woman, she's psychotic, she's schizophrenic. She too sees through that this man, she's looking for a surrogate father figure, but she too rejects this man. So it was a very strong statement that was coming from Mahesh Bhatt. It had the tropes of mainstream work, but the content and the characterization were very different. So then after that came the age of the 90s. And then when Indian cinema went sort of, responded to globalization. I feel that with globalization came the Maine Pyar Kiya, Dilwale, and this one, Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, Kuch Hota Hai. These kind of big romance. I mean, you had the king of romance.
Actually,
And all.
sorry for
Yeah.
coming in. Because this is very interesting. So, very interestingly, when our films were going on global stage and becoming more stylish visually, heroines like Simran from Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge or Madhuri Dixit's character from Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, those characters were actually kind of a throwback to the old age when the women were very meek and they were,
Yes.
I mean, I would not call them meek, they had the strengths of their own, but they were sticking to the so-called conservative values of I mean,
Yeah.
those were
I was coming
essentially
to that.
family pictures.
Yeah, I was coming to
So how do
that
you?
because I think that has to do with our response to globalization. I think the response was a once of insecurity that this kind of globalization might cut our, cultural roots, and people will get deracinated from their traditions and ways of thinking. That's why, even in Dilwale, that's why I find that when her mother says she'll give her jewelry, run away and get married to the man you love, they want the blessing of the parents, of the father. So finally, the last scene, Jao Simran ji le apni zindagi, then the father has to, very patriarchal way, he has to give a hand into the hand of another man. So she's always the protected one, and there is always the Karwa Chauth. All these other symbols are celebrated, even in Kabhi
So
Kham Kabhi Khush. So that was the
beautiful.
response decade. I think it was the response of the industry as such, stuck between the glamour of westernization, shooting films abroad, and at the same time, fear of losing the audience to this totally westernized heroine. And by that time,
That's a
the
very
dress
interesting response.
had stopped. Earlier our dress code was the heroine would be demure, she would be wearing traditional clothes, a sari, salwar kameez. Even if she wore Western clothes, towards the end, she becomes the ideal Bahu wife
Housewife,
type.
yes.
So, so I find that that decade passed, and somehow with the coming of the new millennium, there has been a change in the genres that we started exploring. The heroes were becoming more vulnerable, as Balaji said, and real people. An Ayushman Khurrana, Rajkumar Rao, these kind of heroes coming in. So the women started getting more agency in these films, even in the what you say non-serious film like a rom-com. The biggest change came in the rom-coms of that period.
So actually, I want to kind of use this link to go to Balaji with the next question. So we will return to this very interesting discussion in a minute. So Balaji, here is my question that we are increasingly seeing. So some can say that Shah Rukh Khan started this trend of showing the male vulnerability through films like maybe Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. And as Maithili correctly mentioned, we have heroes like Ayushman Khurrana and Rajkumar Rao who are not afraid to show their softer or more vulnerable sides in various films. At the same time, you are also seeing films from South India, which are coming in technically extremely accomplished, visually stunning. And like I think when we were discussing the other day, you mentioned about the four figure becoming a new norm. I mean, of a success. So, and if you take a look at a film like a KGF or an RRR, the kind of protagonists that they are portraying are again completely different from what we are used to seeing. So I would like to take that as one point, and the failure of some of the recent big banner films in Bollywood as another point. And I would like to know your take on that. What is going on? So
Really, it's very difficult to say why a film would become a hit or why it would become a flop. If only technical prowess or technical excellence or superior technology or superior camera work, if that had to do the job alone, then Shan would have been a big hit. Ashoka, Shah Rukh Khan's Ashoka would have been a big hit, right? But the fact is, these movies came a cropper, right? multi-star films like Rambal Ram and all, terrible films. Sometimes, see, that's why Bollywood filmmaking is a gamble. You never know what works. If Ashoka didn't work, Chakte India, a low budget, a very even he didn't have too much high hopes on that came out brilliantly well. So I think what to play safe with. I think the safe bet is to have a good story, uh, logical characterization. For example, why were people able to connect with the angry young man? And the first angry young man was not Amitabh, it was Dharmender in Satyakam. The first angry young man, because from the late 60s onwards, somewhere people had started getting a bit frustrated about what was happening even 20 years after independence. Kuch nahi ho raha hai. Or mere apne, the angry young generation, they want to be kids, they want to study, they want to grow up, they want to pass out from college, and they want to do good jobs. Yet exams are not happening in college. They're getting rusticated. Now, they were only welting under frustration that it required someone like an angry young Vijay to come and bash the hell out of things and say, I'm going to vent my frustration and I'm going to live my life my own way. So that fitted in well in a point in time. Secondly, if you look at Shah Rukh Khan's, the Raj in DDLJ, it was an upwardly mobile India. They were getting into the IT edge. Growth was happening. The Indian diaspora was growing, and people didn't feel sort of ashamed of talking about their wealth anymore. They were upwardly mobile, and that's why the character of Raj fitted in very well into the scheme of things. So a character has to have a point in time reference. It has to be a good story. It has to be technically good, and then your prayers have to be strong. So I think it's a combination of all these things that make a film work. Really, there is no formula, or people would have figured it out.
That's very interesting way to look at the so-called magic formula of success. So, Maithili, here is my question to you on the basis of that. I think you made a very interesting point in one of your conversations where you said that there is a distinction which is required between Bollywood and Hindi films. So many times these words are used interchangeably, and I think both of you would agree with me that that is actually not 100% accurate. So we are seeing, and especially in the new age with the OTT platforms offering an alternate medium to sort of for the creative works to be displayed. We Can we take a minute about talking about the so-called indie movement in the last maybe 20-25 years, maybe starting from in that way? I don't know whether it would qualify strictly as an indie film, but I thought Satya was somewhat a very important milestone in that entire thing, where for the first time people went to see a film where there were virtually no big star, no big director, no song and dance sequence. I mean, there was one song towards the end, if I remember correctly, and yet the film not only became commercially successful but kind of a cult classic. So I remember Mumbai police had put up an ad telling people not to give up to extortion, and even in that ad they had used Saurabh Shukla's image as a throw up. So whenever that is the level of entry that you start to have through popular culture, you know that you have hit upon a success. So taking that as a starting point and all the way to maybe something like a Panchayat, which was again a very successful program and which had nothing to do with so-called the cities, big cities of India. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I think, I said we have to make a distinction because Bollywood at one point became an all encompassing word to describe not just Hindi cinema, and it destroyed Hindi cinema's regionality, the regional differences there in the speech and the where the places. Films either happened in Bombay or in Delhi, or sometimes they would go off somewhere but a little while, but they would return to the big city. So that urbanization and people migrating to the city was again another storyline that way. But what happens was the new writing that has come about in this new millennium, and then OTT coming in, that had you didn't have to, you could sit at home and watch those films. You didn't have to go to the theater. You could sit in Kerala or you could sit in Haryana and can see Patal Lok or Mirzapur, and these are the films. So that compulsion for Hindi, the Bollywood, to be the all India film which would appeal to everyone, was it failing because it couldn't keep up with that demand. There in the heyday of Amitabh, anyone, it became the all India big film. Sholay could be seen anywhere and enjoyed. But that kind of a status for Bollywood was declining because it couldn't meet all the aspirations. And also, you should see sociologically, regional languages and the regional cinemas were catering to that. The local aspirations and the local storytelling traditions and the idioms. So then even regional identities were becoming more assertive. That's why Telugu cinema made the second largest films after Hindi at one point, in the sheer number of films being made. So people did have that local alternative and the so-called all India film. So I think when they started making these big films like from the 70s and 80s, which weren't being successful, leave the 90s, that those four big romantic family dramas and all that. Other than that, you weren't getting the big all India hits because I think the writing was getting too not rooted in any particular milieu. So I think that rootedness of the story and the characters came with the writing and setting the films in smaller places. Even if you set the film in Delhi, like Badhai Ho, it still is one very identifiable segment of Delhi. Or even if you see that breakthrough kind of a film, that Band Baja Barat, it is very down market Delhi, not the big South Delhi that way. So, not the Lodi Gardens, the big lawns, and you found that mohallas and people being very comfortable over there, crowded localities. And the girl there is and again, here comes the change. Here she becomes the agent of change. She wants to get out and get into the big league of wedding planning, So that was again it was a second film, but then Anushka got the bigger role, and she was actually the driving agent of the film. So along with the changing milieu, telling stories about ordinary people and in recognizable settings, with that came the empowerment of women in the narrative. And you discovered new actors, and then you're also breaking a whole lot of myths about what an Indian woman is supposed to be. Take the same person who made, what's his name, who made Band Baja Barat. He went and made Shuddha Desi Romance, where the couple denies they don't want to get married. They're running there. It's a very unusual story set in Jaipur. These are rental Baratis, and they keep meeting. And then there is that a whole lot of premarital sex is not, there's no apology for it. It's accepted as a way of it. And that too in a small town, So these are all the social taboos that are being broken in the narrative. So that's why when you come to Badai Ho, you find that more than the titular hero and heroine, it's the parents who are the most interesting characters. And
Correct.
now, as Balaji said, the new character writing. The writers are investing time and talent in creating very credible supporting casts. And you found wonderful actors, who were like really relegated to the sidelines. Seema Pahwa, Gajaraj Rao, and then Neena Gupta came back with a bang in this, and also in Panchayat. So, in Badai Ho, and then even taboo subjects, I'm not talking now only of rom-coms, because the rom-coms are really show the big change that is happening, live-in situations. If you see, and then who are the ones who are making this? Yash Raj is producing these films.
Very interesting.
Yeah, the
Now,
big, yeah. You wanted to say something, Kapil?
no. So please finish. I have another question.
Yeah. So these things came in, and so along with this, you also had, Kahani and others came a little later. Queen and Kahani and others came later, really where the it's the woman is the dominating character in the narrative. So that kind of a change, I think, is reflecting what I call the presence of working women in the cities. I know
Cities.
they're a
Very
small,
much.
minuscule minority, but the ads are just target them, the consumerist ads that are
Absolutely.
coming
They
in.
are the decision makers there.
They are the decision makers. So that's why I call my new forthcoming, sorry for that, the millennial woman, is she Bollywood's new brand? So you see that, a film like just Deepika came as a pretty young woman. Later, you see a Piku, you see a cocktail where she
Yes.
plays the anti-heroine kind of a thing. I mean, she's doesn't get the man because she's too westernized, but she is the finally, in the sense, the moral winner, in the sense who
Even
moves
Shakun
on.
Batra's Gehraiya.
Gehraiya later. See, Gehraiya couldn't, I think, connect with a lot of people because maybe it was too Woody Allenish for the Indian audience. They couldn't take these kind of very fluid relationships and sudden, actually, people driven by lust as such. It doesn't mask the emotions.
Lust.
So that kind of an openness is something that is coming out. I don't know how much they appeal to the all India audience, but they are the ones that will keep Hindi cinema alive in the context of the challenge from the south. And just I'll add one thing about the south. Even Kantara, which has been hailed as tribal rights and a very different kind of a narrative from a KGF, though from the same making company. It sort of is resurrecting masculinity, which is almost toxic in all these films, Pushpa or KGF or Kantara, also your Shivana, the character, Rishabh Shetty's character, they're all, the women are again like adoring submissive women. They're made, even though they've been harassed and it reminds you of the old romantic films where wooing was like actually sexual harassment, stalking. That was the way courtship was portrayed in mainstream cinema. That seems to be coming back with a vengeance in these films. So that's why, I think maybe somebody told me that even before these big films came, the Telugu films, the uh, regular pot boilers with action and big heroes and all that, dubbed versions were very popular in the Hindi belt. On
They
they
are popular everywhere, not just Hindi belt. I think even in Maharashtra there is a big viewing for them. And actually,
because
I have something to.
I'll just
I
add,
have
I
something.
have a feeling that, with the age of Amir and Shah Rukh Khan, what the Hindi film industry was portraying was the metrosexual man, sophisticated, not so overtly aggressive. I think the kind of a rural audience was looking for a resurrection of that masculinity that they could identify with. Maybe it's too deep rooted in our society that you respond to that kind of a hero. The age of the metrosexual man seems to have ended with the coming of the toxic masculinity. You just see one Kabir Singh became such a huge hit, remake of Arjun Reddy. But the same actor playing Jersey, which doesn't have that kind of a narrative, didn't work with the Hindi audience.
Okay,
There,
so here I would like to, yeah, Maithili, I would like to just come in here for a minute. That I think I'm really not sure whether we can use the word toxic for all masculinity in the portrayal of men. And here I would also like to have your fellow panelists' opinion. So some people might say that there is a fine line between metrosexuality and emasculation. And I
yeah.
think to a certain extent, there has definitely been emasculation of men, not just in popular culture, but in culture as a whole. So there have been writers like Richard Reeves and Christina Hoff Summers in the US who have been doing research on how boys are losing out to girls in important fields like education, higher education, and such. So in that context, isn't it only a response? Now again, mind you that this is in no way a endorsement of any kind of bad behavior. So bad behavior in all form needs to be censored in the strictest terms possible. But showing men who are capable of fighting, capable of meeting, punching back twice as hard, to use a term, I am really not sure if that is necessarily a bad thing. Balaji, where do you stand on this?
You mean men fighting back is not a bad thing? Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify your question. Did you say that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Um,
saying that today what is happening is that unfortunately, masculinity and toxic masculinity, there is no bifurcation left. So
hmm,
today in the discourse, almost all masculinity is referred to as toxic masculinity. And I just want to know if there is a line between them, or at this point of time in popular culture, all masculinity is toxic masculinity.
no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say all masculinity is toxic. I think there's some lot of
Or
positive
for example,
masculinity.
Yeah.
do you think that success of Kantara, as another popular filmmaker also referred to it on Twitter yesterday, has got to do with return of patriarchy and masculinity, or do you think the film succeeded because it was a good film, broadly
See,
speaking?
good films succeed because they are good. Uh, I'm not okay. I haven't seen Kantara, but the fact is, there is a lot of positive masculinity also in the films, right? That we're talking about, not just toxic masculinity. What is masculinity? Masculinity is about giving respect to everyone, right? Whereas toxic masculinity is when you're saying that I'm the boss, I'm everything, right? That is negative. You're trying to bulldoze, you're trying to wrestle, you're trying to elbow your way through and try to assert yourself. Whereas in positive masculinity, and I'll tell you where I've seen this positive masculinity, even in a film like a DDLJ or say Chak De India. Okay,
Oh,
this man is a underdog. Okay, this guy Kabir Khan is an underdog. He has been down and out. He has been shunted out. He has been accused of throwing matches. There, what is he doing? He's not pushing himself forward. He's taking a whole team forward. He's responding by getting others to do what he wants to do. That is positive masculinity, right? Because what he's doing is he's saying, it's always believed that जो बोलता है ना क्या लड़कियां निकर विकर पहन के क्या खेलेंगी. He says, I am a man, but मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ कि it is not just about a man's game. This can become a woman's game as well, and they can play just as anyone else. That is positive masculinity, right? Whereas toxic, in fact, I would say toxic masculinity is what I have seen in some of the earlier films where you see the woman bending and touching her husband's feet or unko pranam karte hue, or even I've seen in a couple of films where the dialogues are so raw, saying that आदमी आदमी होता है औरत औरत होती है, right? So that is, I would say, those are toxic. But today, if you show anything close to a toxic masculinity or trying to show misogyny, then you're setting the film up for failure because it's going to be rejected by more than 50% of the population upfront. You're taking a big risk by doing that, and I don't think any filmmaker would take that risk today.
Absolutely. Uh, I have another question for you, Balaji, which is got something to do with the subject of the book that you have written. I think you are the first, you are one of the first, if not the first, person to chronicle the bad guys of Hollywood, bad guys of Bollywood. Now, as a teenager who used to watch award shows of both Hollywood and Bollywood, one of the things that used to strike me very powerfully is that in Hollywood there used to be no award for best villain. So, for example, Rafe Fiennes from Schindler's List or John Malkovich from In the Line of Fire, these people were the so-called villains of those films. But when they were nominated in the supporting actor category. In some ways, you can say that Anthony Hopkins is also a villain in Silence of the Lambs for the kind of person that he portrays. But he was nominated and won as the best actor category. And whereas in Bollywood, for a long time, I remember there used to be a category of best villain also. And I think this is one place where the distinction is getting sharper and sharper as the time goes by in terms of changing the hero and villain binary to more of a protagonist and antagonist kind of a binary. So, for example, if you take the Vikram Vedha or for even for that matter, Sacred Games, in Sacred Games is Nawazuddin Siddiqui the antagonist to Saif Ali Khan's story, which is taking place in another timeline, or he is there are simply two protagonists in two different timelines. Similarly, in Vikram Vedha, who really is is there really a villain between these two men? So the way I see it is that the Hindi cinema or Indian cinema, for that matter, is moving from the binary of hero and villain to more of a protagonist and antagonist whose wants or whose needs are simply in direct opposition to each other. So, would you like
Yeah,
to throw
I would
some
say
light on that?
yes. Yes, I would say this is point of view filmmaking. That is where you say that it is not binary, right? But it is a mix. Uh, so these are what I have categorized in my book as the ensemble of gray, right? A gray ensemble of characters who are very ambiguous in nature. They pose questions, and there are some answers which themselves become questions. For example, one of the earliest films, and those were very far and few between. For example, there's this movie called Jagte Raho, which was in 1961. Sorry, 57. I'm sorry, I forgot the date. There, all the characters are gray. They're all into some negativity or the other, but you can't put a finger and say that this guy is the worst of the lot. It was a gray ensemble. And now that has become very prominent also if you look at it in films like Heather. Okay. In Heather, is Khurram Mir bad? Is he good? Okay. Or in Omkara, who is good, who is bad? We can forever keep debating it. Right. So that again shows matured filmmaking, because then you are not thrusting a decision down the audience throats. You're giving them food for thought. You're treating the audience in a matured manner. And it takes a matured writer and a matured filmmaker to treat the audience in a matured manner. So I would say you're right that like Kajol was the first woman to win the best villain award, for Gupt. But in that same context, I would like to take it forward that the differences are blurring. There is no real pure white or a pure black. There are shades of gray, and depends on which angle you look at it. Or I was just in another session just a short while back. If you look at Dr. Asthana and Ankur Arora murder case, he tries to hush up a messed up operation procedure in which a child has died, and he tries to justify his act saying, I made a mistake, but I said so many lies. अधमरे लोग जिनको भगवान भी कुछ नहीं करते, मैं उनको जिंदा करता हूँ. मैंने एक गलती किया तो क्या हो गया? That's his point of view, but the script writers given him a chance to talk about his point of view. Did anyone give Gabbar the chance to say why he was so cruel? No. So this point of view makes for matured filmmaking, and you're right. That's what it's come down to. It's come down to a gray.
Great. Great. Maithili, I think you made a very interesting statement that you said that the writers disappeared from the credit after Mr. Salim Javed. So there was a time when Mr. Salim Javed, because of their strong screenplays, were as well known as probably the director of the film or even the people who used to act in those films. And then we had a period of kind of a lull where we really did not have those kind of writers who were uh, asserting their imprint or asserting their creative signature on their work. Uh, for the last 3 years, I have been part of this screenwriting collective called Spiral Bound, which is started by a very well-known actor, Mr. Baman Irani. And there it is basically a group of people who are aspiring screenwriters, and everyone in between, anybody who is interested in understanding the dynamics behind writing a screenplay. We get together for 90 minutes, maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week, and we discuss and we try to find out some techniques purely by watching old English films, or not old, but English films, which adhere to a certain kind of a structure, which we call as a three-act structure. So the three-act structure, which Aristotle, I think, first talked about, has been present since the Aristotelian time. So when we are looking at that as a writing thing, we feel very encouraged, because we think that what we are trying to do is we are trying to make a fundamental change into the way the films are being films, or for that matter even TV serials or shows, are being created and constructed. And we feel that even the success of some of the recent films and shows actually show a bias towards strong writing. We talked about Satya a while ago, where the script written by, I think, if I'm not wrong, Anurag Kashyap and Saurabh Shukla and Ram Gopal Verma, was one of the key factors behind the success of the film. And even in recent time, my friend Advaita Kala wrote a wonderful film Kahani, which again was appreciated as much for the story and screenplay as it was for Sujoy's direction and Vidyaji's performance. So, do you think that writing can create the kind of new Bollywood or new structure for Bollywood in the days to come?
Definitely, definitely, because there's a kind of a cliche saying that the film is a director's medium and TV is a writer's medium. That's been like spouted as the summing up the two media that way, two different platforms. But I think they're coming together now. And very often you see that the director's name is also there, part of the writing team. And their inputs are also there. I think this is all for the good. And so many, it's just so many new names are coming out with the writing in the writing fraternity. It's very encouraging. And these are original stories. Maybe they're based on what you said, that you're studying the structure of Hollywood. And I had suddenly, when you were talking of that, I was reminded once long ago, I had interviewed Vijay Tendulkar for this thing. There were 3 screen writers that I had to do for Indian Film Festival abroad. They called it the Indian Summer. And when I was talking to Vijayji, what he said, that when he was a student in Pune, he used to skip classes and go and watch Hollywood films. And he says most of the structuring of theater and the 3-act and the way dialogue works to create the character was from watching Hollywood. So you are following a very illustrious predecessor that way, who wrote such, both in theater and then what he did for some of the parallel cinema. I mean, many of Shyam Benegal's films were written by him earlier. So Artha Satya also was written by him. So then, so I think you do need that kind of amount, because Indian cinema, the earlier Indian cinema was like a thali. Like all the navrasas have to be present in the aesthetic sense, like how you have your palate has the graves, the sweet, sour, the bitter, everything, like you need to get everything from one medium. And that became like the film became, some of the films, especially in the South, had this very silly comedy track, which had nothing to do with the main storyline. You had cast a good comedian, so you have to create a separate track for them. That was there in the 50s. So nowadays, I think they are getting more, the scripts are getting more organic. So if you see Kahani, all the characters, I mean, she's the mystery woman, Vidya over there. But then the Bob Biswas, the two are the cop there in what's his name? That very Paramrita.
Amrita.
Yes, he was the cop who's almost falling half in love with the Vidya's character. He takes her around. Then Nawazuddin comes there, very brisk, and they might not have that much of screen time. Even that little boy in the place where Vidya is staying, and he brings her water or something, and she's a oddity, a woman, a big pregnant woman alone in that guest house, and going out at all odd times and all that. So even that desk, the guy at the desk, that little boy, they have so well written the characters, because when you think back to the film, you remember all these, not just Vidya and the other 2 main characters, So that is where I think the key is, that you have to create really interesting characters, not just as props, stereotypes, like saying, oh, the talkative cousin, the domineering aunt, the kind of. So I found that in Badhai Do, the second film after that, Badhai Ho, where you have this lavender marriage between a lesbian woman and a gay man. He's in the closet and she comes out much before he does. to own that to confess her sexual preference. So the characters in Vijay Kumar Rao's house, it's a big extended family of cousins and aunts and uncles. They all come out. They might have just about 5 minutes screen time, but you remember them. So this is where the writer comes in more than the director, I think. Director might do the casting part very well, but the writing of these what you call minor characters are very, very important, and they add to your enjoyment of the film and
Yes,
makes it
now
very.
we have about 2-3 minutes left for this before we open it for Q&A, if there are questions from the audience. So I have one question which is for both of you, and I would like you can answer in whatever sequence you want. So there are two things. One is that with the OTT coming in, is it only an alternative medium available for screening films the way we used to see films on cable TV earlier, or is it a different medium altogether? One. And second question is that we are now seeing recently we have been seeing some efforts on part of the Uttar Pradesh government for setting up a large film city kind of a setup somewhere in Uttar Pradesh. And do you think geographical diversification would add more diversification to the industry, Hindi film industry? So I'm not talking about Bollywood here necessarily, of Hindi, considering Hindi filmmaking is the topic that we are talking about. Films, do you think films made in Mumbai and films made in, say, for example, Noida would essentially be different films? These are my two questions. You can take them in whatever order you like.
Balaji, you want to go
Balaji, you can
first?
go.
Well, say about 30 years back when there was only television, not even cable TV, TV was like a fallback for failed artists, right? Or even directors who are not getting those big breaks. And you see, big directors have had come into television. B.R. Chopra, Ramanand Sagar, Ramesh Sippy, they had all come into television. So it was like a sort of a retire, no option. I've got no option. कुछ तो survive करना इसलिए यहाँ पे आ गया मैं. Now, today that is not the case. What kept the industry head above water in the pandemic was OTT, because people had no theaters to go to. And today it is, and I think it's a welcome change that it's being seen as an alternate theater. Look at the factor of multiplication, right? You can view it anytime. Okay, you can view it at your leisure. You can view it through any device, and that so the distribution is at least 5-6x more, and that's good for filmmakers. Secondly, you can tailor it for various audiences. You said movie made in Noida different from movie made in Bombay, and even the audience can be tailored. I mean, you can package different things for different kinds of audience. Look at Panchayat. It is neither Bollywood nor Bombay. Nothing. It's maybe some remote village, but it did appeal to a lot of people because they were able to relate to it. Now, could a big producer have taken the risk of making a small town village based film and putting so much of money into it? Could he have risked? Would the distributors pick it up? Would the theater owners even pick it up? But an OTT platform will pick it up because it gives the distribution reach. And somewhere in the country, there are some people who are going to switch on their TVs or their networks and watch it. So I think it's good. It is not seen as a poor cousin of the cinema big screen anymore. I think it's an alternative. It's a welcome alternative, and I think it's here to stay. And it's here to stay for a lot of people. Look at how carriers have got resurrected. Abhishek Bachchan's come back, right? Saif Ali Khan, second phase of life in his acting career, and this is the third phase. First one was Haathon mein aaya dupatta tera and all that. Then he came back in films like Dil Chahta Hai.
Ek Hasina Thi.
Ek Hasina Thi, Dil Chahta Hai. And this is his third comeback. Yeah, Omkara. And now this is his third comeback, actually, if you look at it. So I think it's good.
Maithili?
He's also created an actor like Pankaj Tripathi,
Yeah.
who was like, I noticed him first time when I watched Newton. I said, this is a remarkable actor, what a character he is.
Yeah.
Sort of, he overshadows Rajkumar Rao in certain scenes. And then he started being everywhere. A film sold, like the one that Surrogate Mother, Mimi.
Yeah.
That it is like she's, it is supposed to be a remake of a Marathi film, but then I found a lot of problems with the film. With her characterization. But
Yes,
Pankaj
Surrogate,
Tripathi,
yeah.
appear in that film that way, So it is creating more actors. It's creating, I think, giving people want to know who wrote this film. I remember once there was, before Patal Lok came, there was a TV discussion I think Anupama Chopra had with all the writers and how did they go about doing this, coming up with Patal Lok. They took 2 years to write the whole thing, the whole series. So, what happens is, like, unlike television serials, which I don't know unless people have no access to, internet, I don't think the TV serials as such are doomed. I think at the more, as you get more internet connectivity, there is scripts written in the last moment on the set when they're shooting the daily versions, whereas in a OTT you have enough time to flesh out the locale, get care of the details. Because the first time I watched a series like this was Homeland when I was in the US. Then I said, how much of attention to detail. She comes back, Carrie comes back after prolonged stay in hospital or something. She comes home to her apartment, and as she comes out, there is a table and there's a vase of flowers, and they're all wilted, and they're all, the petals are all fallen. I said they could take care of, for the passage of time, they could take care of that little detail which hardly lasted 2 seconds on screen. But then it's striking. You have the time to make these kind of, go into these details to create the total credibility of the story that you're telling. So I think that way OTT gives you the time to invest in the story, in the characters, and come up with a good, credible, and entertaining and engaging product. But still, sometimes I miss the experience of going to the theater, watching it with films, watching it with friends. And I suppose
No,
that
nothing can
happens.
replace that experience.
Yeah, that experience is something like, a collective experience. I remember even at a press show when Jojita Wahi Sikandar was screened to the press, I remember including a person like Iqbal Masood standing up and clapping at the end of the film, because we were, vicariously we were enjoying the victory of the underdog in the film. So that collective experience, I think, is lost, but then we gain so much more, the convenience of it. But I think I suppose I saw Brahmastra on the small screen. I don't know how it looked on the big screen on the theaters, but it was, when you have these Marvel kind of films. I've seen people abroad also, when there's a new Marvel film coming, they'll make it a point to go to the theater and watch it there. Even with when COVID receded, those films are doing well. So maybe the same will happen here.
I remember, speaking of details, I remember this show, Breaking Bad, where they actually made a mathematician to calculate how much space a particular amount of money would require. So I think the point about attention to details is very well taken. Uh, it seems there are no questions from audience at this point of time, so we can continue talking for maybe another minute or so. I can take some parting comments from both of you. Basically, I want to know that if we were talking about a one line of the future of Bollywood or Hindi film as an industry, what would that future be? Balaji, you go first. One line.
Good stories, strong characters. That's going to be the future. All the rest will settle around it in terms of the big budgets. I think people are mature enough to know that the budgets come later. Story and the characters and the conflicts within them come first.
Maithili.
I echo what he said. Good story and discovering new writers. That's very important to me. Discovering new writers and giving a new chance to new actors. You even, because I saw something like Ghar Wapsi, a thing set in. I was taken by that, set in Indore, and I didn't recognize any of the actors, but they held me. So
So
that
if
is,
there are
yeah.
so if
That
there
is
are any people who are watching this show, producers, please remember these two very eminent journalists have talked about writing, and I am a writer, so please keep that in mind. I want to thank Maithili and Balaji for this extremely informative, extremely participative and very. I mean, I know that there was the order of question was very random, and I was trying to keep it as random as possible. And you both responded very well. I want to thank Pune International Literature Festival and Vishwakarma Publication, most notably Dr. Manjiri Prabhu and Mr. Vishal Soni of Vishwakarma Publications for their wonderful support. Thank you so much, Rucha, for introducing us, and we hope to see you all people very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been great being with all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Pune. It's a
Thank you,
city
Pune
that
Lit Fest. And thank you, Mayur.
Thank you for this. Enjoyed
Thank you,
talking to
Maithili. Enjoyed the session very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a very interesting and amazing discussion. Thank you, Maithili Rao, Balaji Vittal, Mayur Didolkar, for being PILF guests and having such an insightful discussion. Our next session begins at 5:15 p.m. Please join us for celebrating Agatha Christie, the author and grandmother, Dr. Manjari Prabhu, in conversation with Matthew Pritchard, Agatha Christie's grandson. You don't have to miss this. Join all. Thank you.